A lone Hell's Angels wanted a family to spend Christmas with, so a woman and her daughter showed up. Jack Frost Morrison had been riding alone for 15 years, ever since his wife Sarah passed away from cancer and his grown kids scattered across the country. At 61, he'd made peace with solitude most days, but as December rolled around and Christmas decorations appeared in every small town he passed through, the loneliness hit harder than usual. He'd spent the last 3 Christmases at truck stops eating microwave dinners and pretending the holiday didn't exist, but this year felt heavier somehow. Frost had pulled into Cedar Falls, Oregon 2 weeks before Christmas, planning to stay just long enough to get his bike serviced and wait out a cold snap. The town looked like it belonged on a Christmas card, with wreaths hanging from every lamppost, lights strung across Main Street, and a massive tree in the town square that locals were still decorating. The whole scene made Frost's chest ache with memories of Christmases past when his house had been full of noise and laughter and the smell of Sarah's famous gingerbread cookies. He'd checked into a small motel on the edge of town and spent his first few days wandering around, grabbing meals at the local diner and watching families shop for presents through store windows. The waitress at the diner, a woman named Betty, had taken to chatting with him during meals, and on his 4th visit she'd asked directly, "You spending Christmas alone this year, honey?" Frost had nodded, and Betty clucked her tongue sympathetically. "That's no good. Nobody should be alone at Christmas." On a cold evening about a week before Christmas, Frost found himself at the town's community center where they were having some kind of holiday event. He hadn't meant to go inside, had just been walking past when the sound of children singing carols drifted out, but something pulled him through the doors. Inside, families filled folding chairs watching kids perform on a small stage, and along one wall was a Christmas tree decorated with paper ornaments. Frost stood in the back, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, watching with a mixture of longing and resignation. An older woman named Margaret approached him and explained that every year they did this gathering where local kids performed and families could participate in various holiday activities. "We also have a wishing tree," Margaret said, pointing to the decorated tree. "People write down Christmas wishes on the ornaments and hang them up. Sometimes wishes get granted by community members who want to spread a little extra joy." Frost studied the tree with its colorful paper ornaments, each one presumably holding someone's wish. Something about Margaret's genuine smile and the warmth in the room made Frost curious despite himself. He found himself at the craft table a few minutes later with a paper ornament and pen in hand. He felt ridiculous, a 61-year-old Hell's Angel writing a wish like some kid waiting for Santa, but the loneliness pushed the pen across the paper. He wrote simply, "I wish for a family to spend Christmas with, just for one day," and before he could talk himself out of it, he hung the ornament on the tree and left without looking back. The next few days passed in their usual routine. Frost had almost forgotten about the wish entirely, dismissing it as a moment of weakness. He was planning to leave Cedar Falls the day after Christmas, had already mapped out his route south. He certainly wasn't expecting the knock on his motel room door 3 days before Christmas. When Frost opened the door, he found a woman standing there with a girl who looked to be about 8 years old. The woman was maybe in her mid-30s, with kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a warm sweater under her winter coat. The little girl held her mother's hand tightly, looking up at Frost with open curiosity. "Mr. Morrison?" the woman asked, and Frost nodded slowly, confused about how she knew his name. "My name is Elena Martinez, and this is my daughter Sophia. Margaret from the community center gave us your information. We saw your wish on the tree." Frost stared at them for a long moment, his mind trying to process what was happening. Heat rose in his cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and something else he couldn't quite name. "Look, I don't know what Margaret told you, but I didn't mean to, that was just," he stumbled over the words, not sure how to explain away something he'd written in raw honesty. Elena held up a hand gently. "Please, let me explain. Sophia and we're alone this Christmas too. My husband, Sophia's father, he passed away 2 years ago from a heart attack. We've been trying to figure out how to handle the holidays without him, and it's been really hard." Her voice caught slightly as she squeezed her daughter's hand. "When we saw your wish on the tree, about wanting a family just for one day, Sophia said maybe we could be that family. That maybe we could help each other." The little girl spoke up then, her voice small but clear. "Mommy says Christmas is better when you share it with people. And you look nice, even with all the leather and the motorcycle. I like motorcycles. Her honest assessment made Frost's lips twitch into an almost smile despite the emotional weight of the moment. He looked between the mother and daughter, seeing the genuine hope in their faces, and felt something crack open in his chest. I don't understand, Frost said slowly. You don't know me. I could be anyone, could be dangerous. He gestured at his Hell's Angels vest hanging visible in the room. Elena shook her head, and he noticed she looked tired, like someone who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. Margaret told us about you, how you've been coming to the diner every day, always polite, always tipping well. She said you were someone who was grieving and alone, just like us. Sophia tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered something. Elena nodded and looked back at Frost. Sophia wants to know if you'd like to come to our house for Christmas dinner. It's just going to be us, nothing fancy, but we always make too much food anyway and the house feels so empty with just the two of us. We live at 432 Maple Street, the blue house with the white shutters. If you want to join us, Christmas dinner is at 2 o'clock. No pressure. Before Frost could respond, Sophia stepped forward and held out a folded piece of paper. I made you this, she said shyly. Frost took it carefully, and when he unfolded it, he found a child's drawing of a Christmas tree with 3 stick figures standing next to it, 2 clearly meant to be Elena and Sophia, and 1 larger figure that must have been him, leather vest and all. At the top, in careful child's handwriting, it said, Merry Christmas, Mr. Frost. Thank you, Sophia, Frost managed, his voice rougher than usual. This is really nice. He looked at Elena, who was watching him with understanding eyes. I'll think about it, he said, which was more commitment than he'd planned to give. Elena smiled, and it transformed her tired face into something warmer. That's all we ask. Merry Christmas, Mr. Morrison. She took Sophia's hand and they walked back toward the parking lot, leaving Frost standing in his doorway holding a child's drawing and feeling like his carefully controlled world had just been shaken up. Frost spent the next 2 days in internal debate. Part of him wanted to pack up and leave Cedar Falls immediately, to run from this unexpected offer before it could hurt him or disappoint the woman and child who'd extended it. Another part desperately wanted to say yes, to walk into that blue house and pretend for just 1 day that he had a family again. He kept Sophia's drawing folded in his wallet and found himself pulling it out repeatedly. On Christmas Eve morning, Frost found himself back at the diner where Betty immediately noticed his distracted mood. You look like a man wrestling with a big decision, she said as she poured his coffee. Frost surprised himself by telling her about Elena and Sophia's invitation, about the wish he'd written and how conflicted he felt. Betty listened without interrupting, then sat down across from him with a seriousness that told him she was about to say something important. Let me tell you something, honey, Betty began. I lost my husband 8 years ago, and my kids live on the East Coast. I spent the first few Christmases after he died alone, telling myself I was fine, that I didn't need anyone. But being alone when you don't want to be isn't noble or strong, it's just sad. That woman and her little girl, they're reaching out because they understand what you're feeling. Don't waste that gift because you're scared. Frost stared into his coffee as Betty's words hit close to home. What if I ruin it? He asked quietly. What if I go there and I'm terrible company, or I make them uncomfortable? Sarah, my wife, she was the one who made Christmas special. Without her, I don't know how to do this. His voice cracked slightly on his wife's name. Betty reached across the table and patted his hand. You know what that little girl sees when she looks at you? She sees someone who's hurting like her mom is hurting, like she's hurting. She sees someone who needs what they need, which is to not be alone on a day that's supposed to be about love and family. You don't have to be perfect, Jack. You just have to show up. After leaving the diner, Frost rode his Harley out to the cemetery on the edge of town. He parked and walked through the rows of headstones until he found a quiet spot under a large oak tree, and there he had a conversation with Sarah that would have seemed crazy to anyone watching. I don't know what I'm doing, sweetheart, he said to the cold December air. There's this woman and her kid, and they invited me for Christmas dinner, and I want to go but I feel like I'm betraying you somehow. The wind rustled through the bare branches above him, and Frost found himself remembering Christmas mornings with Sarah, how she'd wake him up too early because she was excited, how she'd burn the bacon while cooking too many things at once and laugh at herself, how she'd insisted on taking family photos every year. Those photos were packed away in storage because looking at them hurt too much. But standing there in the cemetery, Frost realized that maybe the hurt meant the memories were still real, and honoring them didn't mean he had to be alone forever. "I think you'd like Elena," Frost continued, his breath misting in the cold air. "She's got this quiet strength. And Sophia, she's something special. Drew me a picture and everything, decided I was worth including in her Christmas." He paused, emotion thick in his throat. "I'm so tired of being alone, Sarah. Maybe it's time I stopped running from everything that reminds me of what I lost and tried to remember how to live again." Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Frost woke earlier than necessary, nervous energy making sleep impossible. He bought a poinsettia plant and some candy canes from the drugstore, feeling awkward about showing up empty-handed. At 1:30, he climbed on his Harley and rode slowly through the quiet streets toward Maple Street. The blue house with white shutters was easy to spot, decorated simply with lights along the roofline and a wreath on the door. Before he could knock, the door flew open and Sophia stood there, her face lighting up with genuine delight. "Mama, he came. Mr. Frost came." She grabbed his hand and pulled him inside with unself-conscious enthusiasm. The house smelled like roasting turkey and something sweet, and Christmas music played softly from somewhere deeper inside. Elena appeared from the kitchen, wearing an apron and carrying a wooden spoon, her face breaking into a warm smile when she saw Frost. "You came," Elena said, and there was relief in her voice that made Frost realize she'd been genuinely uncertain whether he'd show up. "I'm so glad. Please, come in, make yourself comfortable. We're still about 30 minutes from dinner being ready." Frost handed her the poinsettia and candy canes, and Elena's eyes got a little misty as she accepted them. "These are perfect, thank you. Sophia loves candy canes, and my mother always kept poinsettias at Christmas." Sophia dragged Frost toward the living room, chattering about the presents under the tree and how she'd been up since 6 in the morning. "Do you like hot chocolate? We made some with marshmallows. And cookies. Mama and I made cookies yesterday shaped like trees and stars." She was still holding his hand, this small warm presence anchoring him to the moment, and Frost found himself responding to her questions, his usual gruff exterior softening. The living room held small touches that spoke of a family maintaining traditions despite loss. A framed photo on the mantel showed Elena, Sophia, and a man who must have been Sophia's father, all of them laughing. Elena had placed candles around it, creating a small memorial space. On the wall were children's handprint crafts from different years, and a shelf held books ranging from picture books to young adult novels. This was a home where people lived and loved and tried to keep going even when it was hard. Elena joined them after a few minutes and sat on the couch with a glass of wine while Frost balanced awkwardly on an armchair with his hot chocolate. "Thank you again for coming," she said softly. "I know this must be strange. But Sophia was so insistent after seeing your wish, and I realized she was right. We've been so focused on getting through the holidays that we forgot it doesn't have to be something we just endure. Maybe it could be something we share with someone who understands." Frost looked at this woman being so honest with him and felt his walls crumble. "My wife Sarah died 5 years ago," he heard himself say. "Cancer took her fast. Our kids tried to be there, but they had their own lives in other states, and after the funeral they just drifted away. I sold the house because I couldn't stand being in it without her, and I've been on the road ever since, telling myself I preferred being alone." He paused, looking at Sophia who was listening with serious expression. "But I don't prefer it. I hate it. I just didn't know how to stop." Elena's eyes were understanding, carrying their own grief. "Miguel, my husband, he was only 38 when he died. Heart attack at his desk at work, completely unexpected. One day we're planning Sophia's birthday party, and the next day I'm a widow trying to explain to a 6-year-old why Daddy isn't coming home." Sophia suddenly spoke up, her small voice cutting through the heavy emotion. "Daddy used to say that being sad is okay, but staying sad forever isn't what people who love you would want. I think your wife probably wouldn't want you to stay sad forever either, Mr. Frost." I think she'd want you to have friends and be happy sometimes." The simple wisdom from this 8-year-old hit Frost hard. He felt his throat tighten and had to look away for a moment. When he looked back, both Elena and Sophia were watching him with compassion rather than pity, and something in that distinction made it okay that he was falling apart a little in their living room on Christmas Day. Dinner was wonderful in its imperfection. The turkey was slightly dry, the mashed potatoes had lumps, and the gravy was too salty, but none of that mattered because they were all trying so hard to make this unusual gathering work. Elena had set the table with her nice dishes, and Sophia had made place cards decorated with glitter that kept getting everywhere despite everyone's best efforts. They told stories over the meal, carefully at first and then with growing comfort. Elena talked about Miguel, how he'd proposed on a hiking trip and how he'd been obsessed with teaching Sophia to ride a bike. Sophia shared memories of Daddy making pancakes shaped like animals and letting her stay up late on weekends to watch cartoons. Frost found himself sharing stories about Sarah, things he hadn't talked about in years, like how she'd been a terrible dancer but insisted on dancing anyway, how she'd collected ceramic angels despite Frost thinking they were ugly, how she'd written him love notes even after 30 years of marriage. As they talked, Frost realized sharing memories didn't diminish them or betray the people they'd lost, it actually honored them by keeping them alive in conversation. After dinner, Sophia insisted on showing Frost her room and all her treasures. She showed him her book collection, her stuffed animals, and most importantly, a memory box filled with things that reminded her of her father. "Mama says it's important to remember the happy times," Sophia explained seriously. "So even though I'm sad Daddy is gone, I try to think about all the fun we had." Downstairs, Frost found Elena sitting on the couch looking exhausted but peaceful. "Thank you for indulging her," Elena said. "She doesn't get much male attention these days. I worry about her growing up without that influence." She looked at Frost with an expression he couldn't quite read. "She really took to you. When she saw your wish on that tree, she said you had kind eyes. I thought she was just being fanciful, but she was right." Frost didn't know what to say, so he fell back on the practical. The dinner was real good, and the company was better. "I haven't talked this much about Sarah in years, and it felt good to remember her as a whole person instead of just my loss." He paused, then took a chance on honesty. "This was the best Christmas I've had since she died. You and Sophia made me feel like I belonged somewhere again, even if just for one day." Elena smiled, and he could see the loneliness in her easing slightly. "The invitation was supposed to be for one day, but I'm wondering if maybe we could extend it. Not forever, not with any expectations, just maybe you could visit sometimes before you leave town. Sophia would love to see your motorcycle up close, and I make a mean pot of chili. And selfishly, it would be nice to have another adult to talk to who understands what it's like to lose someone you can't imagine living without." Before Frost could answer, Sophia came back carrying a board game. "Can we play? Please? It's Christmas and we always play games on Christmas." She looked between the two adults with pleading eyes, and Frost found himself nodding. They spent the next 2 hours playing silly games, laughing at bad dice rolls, and somewhere in the middle of it all Frost realized he was happy, genuinely happy in a way he'd forgotten was possible. As the evening wore on and Sophia started yawning, Frost knew it was time to leave. Sophia gave him a fierce hug. "You'll come back, right? Promise you'll come back?" Frost looked at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "Yeah, kiddo, I'll come back. I'm going to be in town a while longer, and your mama said something about teaching me how to make her famous chili." Out on the porch in the cold December night, Elena touched Frost's arm gently. "I meant what I said about having no expectations. You don't owe us anything. But if you want to be part of our lives in whatever capacity feels comfortable, we'd both really like that." Sophia hasn't smiled this much in months, and I forgot what it felt like to not have to be strong every single moment. You made this day special for us, Jack. Thank you. Frost rode back to the motel, but instead of the usual emptiness, he felt full, almost overwhelmed with emotion he'd kept bottled up too long. In his pocket was another drawing from Sophia showing the three of them at the dinner table with "Best Christmas Ever" written across the top. He hung it on the wall next to the first drawing and stared at them both before finally falling into peaceful sleep. The next morning, Frost made a decision. He called his road brother and told him about Cedar Falls, about Elena and Sophia. "Brother, I think I'm going to stay here for a while. Maybe rent a proper apartment, stick around through winter. These people need someone and I need them, and for the first time in 5 years I'm not looking for reasons to run away." Over the following weeks, Frost became a regular presence in Elena and Sophia's life. He helped fix the broken garage door, taught Sophia about motorcycles, and learned to make Elena's excellent chili. He rented a small apartment downtown and found part-time work at the local motorcycle repair shop. The arrangement was comfortable, 3 people who'd been alone finding companionship without pressure. On New Year's Eve, Elena hosted a small party with just Frost, Sophia, and Betty from the diner. As midnight approached, they stood in the backyard watching fireworks, and Sophia held both her mother's hand and Frost's hand. "I'm glad you came for Christmas, Mr. Frost," Sophia said. "Mama and me, we were really sad before. But you made us less sad. And you seem less sad too." Frost squeezed her small hand gently. "I am less sad, kiddo. You two gave me something I didn't know I still needed, a reason to stop running and start living again." He looked at Elena and the understanding that passed between them needed no words. They weren't replacing what they'd lost, they were building something new from the broken pieces, something that honored the past while reaching toward the future. As winter deepened, Frost settled into a rhythm he'd never expected to find again. He had breakfast at the diner, worked at the repair shop, and most evenings he'd head over to Elena's for dinner or to help Sophia with homework or just sit on the couch and talk. It wasn't the life he'd had with Sarah, and it wasn't trying to be. It was something different, built on mutual understanding and the shared knowledge that sometimes family isn't about blood, it's about choosing to show up for people who need you. 6 months later, when spring had transformed Cedar Falls, Frost found himself helping Sophia learn to ride a bike, running beside her while she wobbled and shrieked with delight. Elena watched from the steps with a camera, and when Sophia finally rode on her own, she turned back with the biggest smile and shouted, "Did you see? Did you see me do it?" Frost caught her as she braked too hard, and he heard himself laugh, a deep genuine sound he barely recognized. That night, after Sophia was asleep, Frost and Elena sat on the porch watching the stars. "I've been thinking," Elena said carefully, "about making this more official. Not romantically, but maybe as family. Sophia asked me the other day if you could be her uncle, and I realized there's no rule that says family has to look a certain way." Frost considered this, the idea of being claimed by someone again. "Uncle Frost," he tried out the words. "I like the sound of that. Family doesn't have to look like what it used to. Maybe this is the universe's way of giving me a second chance, even if it looks different than I expected." He reached over and took Elena's hand, a gesture of friendship and commitment. "Yeah, let's make it official. I'm in this for the long haul." The next morning, Sophia woke to find Frost making pancakes while her mother set the table, and the normalcy of it, the beautiful ordinary routine of family breakfast, was exactly what all 3 of them had been missing. Sometimes the best families are the ones you choose, built from wishes written on paper, ornaments and brave invitations extended to strangers, assembled from broken pieces that somehow fit together better than anyone could have planned.